Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rechak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into Ezekiel, the 44th chapter. Okay, and this is pretty much, in the previous couple of chapters, it went into the blueprints of this temple and the court that Ezekiel is seeing in this vision. Okay, so now, as we keep on going, okay, this is still the vision that Ezekiel is receiving. So let's go ahead and read this. This is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 44, verse 1. Then he brought me back the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary, which looketh toward the east, and it was shut. Then said the Lord unto me, This gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because the Lord Yahweh, the God of Israel, hath entered in by it. Therefore it shall be shut. And you can go back and watch the previous videos to see just a somewhat of a depiction of where, based on the description given, these gates would have been, and when it says a gate, what does it actually look like, and so on and so forth. Verse 3, it is for the prince. The prince, he shall sit in it to eat bread before the Lord. He shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate, and shall go out by the way of the same. And when you go into it, remember, as we're going to pull up, as we were going through the blueprints, the Levites, okay, that would be performing the ministering in the temple, they had a particular place, that they would eat the holy things. Okay, and in this case, the prince, the high priest, he would also have a place, okay, that he would, eat there. Okay, which even when you read in Daniel, the 11th chapter, it also refers to, I forget exactly what verse it is, but it refers to the Prince of the Covenant, okay, which was that high priest at the time, because, in Daniel 11, it talks about when Antiochus comes up and pretty much overtakes, the land of Israel, and, takes them all down, including the high priest at the time, which you can read about the history of that in the book of Maccabees. All right, but let's get this real quick. This is Ezekiel chapter 42, verse 43. Then said he unto me, The north chambers and the south chambers, which are before the separate place, they be holy chambers, where the priests that approach unto the Lord shall eat the most holy things. There shall they lay the most holy things, and the meat offering, and the sin offering, and the trespass offering, for the place is holy. So within the temple itself, there were chambers and particular areas that were allotted, for certain things. Some were for the priests, and as we're reading here in chapter 44, at least in this vision, there would be a particular area for the high priest to eat. Okay, verse 4, Then brought he me the way of the north gate before the house. And I looked, and behold, the glory of the Lord Yahweh filled the house of the Lord, and I fell upon my face. And the Lord said unto me, Son of man, mark well, and behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, all that I say unto thee concerning all the ordinances of the house of the Lord Yahweh. So basically he's telling them, pay close attention, and all the laws thereof, and mark well the entering in of the house, with every going forth of the sanctuary. Okay, so everything the Lord was about to tell him and show him, he told him, pay close attention and store this in your memory. Verse 6, And thou shalt say to the rebellious, even the house of Israel, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, O ye house of Israel, let it suffice you of all your abominations. All right, meaning you've what you've done is already enough. Call it a day, because there's no limit to the amount of wickedness and abominable acts that Israel would do. in that ye have brought into my sanctuary strangers, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my sanctuary, to pollute it. Now, when you deal with the word strangers here in this verse in the Hebrew is nakar, or bun nakar, okay, which that word nakar, when you come across strangers in this nakar, in most cases is referring to the heathen, okay. But there's also other words for strangers. I believe gar is one of them, which refers to Israelites. Now, we also know that Israelites were, you know, as an Israelite man, really as a baby, you had to be circumcised. Okay, so the level of wickedness got so bad, you know, like you had similar situations with Jeroboam, who kicked out the Levites and set up these base men to be the priests. Well, guess what? Now, with the level of wickedness that was going on here, you know, not only did they bring these strangers, these heathens, you know, into the sanctuary, okay, to pollute it, right? As it says, they were uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh. Now, when you're uncircumcised in flesh, it means you're, you know, you're that was a covenant the Lord made with us, right? So it separates us. It makes us, it's a part of us being holy because it's one of the ordinances of the Lord. Well, similarly, if you're not circumcised in your mind, and in your mind, you're not separated unto the Lord, your mind is not towards the Lord, which is the case for these strangers. Now, even on top of that, had they just even been regular base Israelites, it's still bad, because the as we're going to read, the rites or the rituals that were to be performed when offering to the Lord in the sanctuary were exclusive to the priests, okay, and in particular the priest of a certain lineage, because the different lines, family lines, had different roles to play when it came to ministering in the temple. Okay, so let's keep on reading. It says, to pollute it, even my house, when ye offer my bread, the fat and the blood, and they have broken my covenant because of all your abominations. See, so that the offering of the bread, the fat, and the blood, that sacrifices, and that's supposed to be performed by the priests that were ordained to do so. Okay, but this goes to show you just how degenerate, you know, and wicked Israel became. Now, let me get actually a precept for this, because if you remember in the beginning chapters of Ezekiel, as we were reading it, the Lord took him in a vision to see what was going on over there in Jerusalem. Okay, and pretty much the same thing, right? This is Ezekiel chapter 8. I'm just going to read the 8th chapter is one example, but I'm just going to read some of the things that Ezekiel saw. Ezekiel chapter 8 verse 12, then said he unto me, so in this vision that Ezekiel is seeing, he's seeing what's going on in Jerusalem. Son of man, hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark? Every man in his chambers, or in the chambers of his imagery? For they say, the Lord Yahweh seeth us not. The Lord hath forsaken the earth. He said also unto me, turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which is the temple, right? Which was toward the north. And behold, there sat women, weeping for Tammuz. Then said he unto me, hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, just 25 men, with their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east, and they worshipped the sun toward the east. So if they were doing these things, it's definitely not far-fetched that as a part of this, they were bringing in these heathens into the temple to do these various different acts, because hey, all these, the sun worship, the weeping for Tammuz and all that, where do you think that Israel learned that from? They didn't come up with it on their own. They learned it from the heathens, the neighboring, nations. This is 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 14. Moreover, all the chief of the priests and the people transgressed very much after all the abominations of the heathen, and polluted the house of the Lord, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. And this is going into what led up to the Lord bringing the Babylonians to bring that tragedy upon Jerusalem. So going back to Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 8, and ye have not kept the charge of my holy things, right? So the things that we had to do, concerning the temple, the sacrifices and all of that, but ye have set keepers of my charge in my sanctuary for yourselves. So instead of you, right, the ones who have been appointed to perform these ordinances and these rites, you have instead set up keepers, others, foreigners, to do it. And that not even the things that are to serve the Lord, but rather the things that are abominable to the Lord, but within his temple. Okay, verse 9, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, no stranger, uncircumcised in heart, nor uncircumcised in flesh, shall enter into my sanctuary, of any stranger that is among the children of Israel. And that word again goes back to Nakar. Okay, but we know that, when it comes to even dealing with Israelite foreigners, we know that at least 3 times a year, they would come to Jerusalem, right, and to serve the Lord, to keep the holy days. So even in the New Testament, you read about that, and they were allowed there. Okay, but the Lord is saying here, because of the abominable, wicked, unbound level of iniquity that Israel was committing, okay, including the Levites and the chief priests, the Lord brought this destruction upon us for that reason. Okay. To verse 10, and the Levites that are gone away far from me, when Israel went astray. Right now, remember when we read in Ezekiel 36, 2 Chronicles 36 and 14, it mentioned that moreover the chief of the priests and the people transgressed. Right, so that included some of the Levites. Right, so verse 10, and the Levites that were gone away far from me, when Israel went astray, which went astray from me after their idols, they shall even bear their iniquity. So as Israel started going off, in these abominable ways, worshiping these idols, I just read a few examples. You had certain Levites that were part of that, partaking in that. And the Lord says what? They're going to bear their iniquity for that. You're going to be punished for that. You're going to carry the burden of that iniquity. Verse 11, yet they shall be ministers in my sanctuary, having charge at the gates of the house, and ministering to the house. They shall slay the burnt offering and the sacrifice for the people, and they shall stand before them to minister unto them. Because they're still going to perform those basic duties, okay, that the priest would do. However, as we keep on reading, there are certain things that they couldn't do. Because they ministered unto them before their idols, and caused the house of Israel to fall into iniquity. Therefore have I lifted up mine hand against them, saith the Lord Yahweh, and they shall bear their iniquity. And they shall not come near unto me, to do the office of a priest unto me, nor to come near to any of my holy things in the most holy place. But they shall bear their shame and their abominations which they have committed. But I will make them keepers of the charge of the house, for all the service thereof, and for all that shall be done therein. So there are certain things when it came to the offerings for the people, actually killing the sacrifice, the maintenance things. When it came to things that were close to the Lord, he said, you're not gonna have that privilege to do that. Verse 14, verse 15. But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, that kept the charge of my sanctuary, When the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall come near to me to minister unto me. And they shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, saith the Lord Yahweh. So those that remain loyal, that didn't go off, that didn't go along with the wickedness, they're the ones that are still going to be allowed to offer those offerings and sacrifices before me and perform the duties that were pertaining to, the ordinances that were more closely related to the Lord. They shall enter into my sanctuary, and they shall come near to my table to minister unto me, and they shall keep my charge. And it shall come to pass that when they enter in at the gates of the inner court, they shall be clothed with linen garments, and no wool shall come upon them, whilst they minister in the gates of the inner court and within. So now it gets into the specifics of what the Lord is requiring here when it comes to serving him, right? That these priests, that would perform these duties, there was a certain type of garment or material of clothing that they had to wear, and certain things that they couldn't wear. Verse 18, they shall have linen bonnets upon their heads, and shall have linen breeches upon their loins. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causeth sweat, because then that would make them unclean. Okay, and if we just look up here, Levitical priest garment. So you can see there are different images here, and once again, these are all just depictions, but you can sort of see, you can get a gist of the bonnet, right? The headpiece. You had the ephod, the linen garment, and all of that, the robes, all of those things, which they're described in, I believe, the book of Exodus or Leviticus, when the Lord was describing how the garment should be made for Aaron and his sons. Okay, but just for a visual. So going back to Ezekiel 44 and 19. So you couldn't sweat. You had to make sure you weren't wearing anything that was going to make you sweat. Verse 19, and when they go forth into the utter court, even into the utter court of the people, they shall put off their garments wherein they ministered, and lay them in the holy chambers. And they shall put on other garments, and they shall not sanctify the people with their garments. So there was a particular set of garments that they had to wear when ministering to the Lord, and a particular other set of garments they would wear when dealing with the people in the outer court. Neither shall they shave their heads, nor suffer their locks to grow long. They shall only poll their heads. So they couldn't, in terms of, hairstyles, they couldn't shave their heads, and they weren't supposed to have super crazy long hair. It was supposed to be right in the middle, polled. Okay, let me actually pull up that word, poll. It says here to cut, clip, trim. Okay, so you just trim it, not no baldness and none of that. Okay, so this is how they were to. This is the appearance they had to maintain. Verse 21, neither shall any priest drink wine when they enter into the inner court. So when they were in the inner court, doing whatever they had to do, they were not allowed to drink wine, which, it makes sense, right? Because you're you're ministering before the Lord. You need to be in the fullness of your mental capacity. Anyway, verse 22, neither shall they take for their wives a widow, nor her that is put away, but they shall take maidens of the seed of the house of Israel, or a widow that had a priest before. So in terms of wives or women they would deal with, if a widow is a woman whose husband is dead. And we know that according to the scriptures, if a woman is married onto a man, the only way she is loosed from that marriage is, in this case, the husband dies, right? So here the Lord is saying, unless the woman's husband was a priest, If she's a widow, you can't take her. Okay, but if her husband was a priest and then he died, okay, then you can take her. Otherwise, you gotta take the maidens, the young women, all right, meaning women of marriageable age. Let's go in here, which even better, bath wala, right, which is a virgin. In this case, an actual virgin, a woman that has never, laid with a man before. So guess what? Them Levites had to have them virgins. Okay. Verse 23. And they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and the profane, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. And in controversy they shall stand in judgment, and they shall judge it according to my judgments. So when there was a matter, when something came up, they would judge accordingly, according to the judgment of the Lord. And they shall keep my laws and my statutes in all mine assemblies, and they shall hallow my Sabbaths. And they shall come at no dead body to defile themselves, because when you come across a dead body, as it says here, you touch a dead body or you're in that presence, that vicinity, you become unclean for a period of time. Okay, you can find that in the law. Okay, so here the Lord is saying you're not allowed to do that, with the exception of, right, but for father or for mother or for son or for daughter, for brother or for sister that had no husband, they may defile themselves. Okay, so for your father, okay, for your mother, okay, for your son or for your daughter or for your brother, for your sister only if she wasn't married, she didn't have a husband, then and in this case it's assuming that they died, right, and then you would be at their burial or their funeral. Verse 26, and after he is cleansed, right, because you will be unclean, even though, in this case, it says that for these you can make that exception, but when you're around them, you become unclean, that dead body, and so you need to be cleansed. So it says, after he is cleansed, they shall reckon unto him 7 days. They're going to count. And in the day that he goeth into the sanctuary, onto the inner court, to minister in the sanctuary, he shall offer his sin offering, saith the Lord Yahweh. And when I was reading this, a thought that came to mind is, it goes to show the mercy of the Lord, how he sort of baked in some grace, right? Because if you really think about it, we're not even supposed to have to, go through this ritual of cleansing, because we're not even supposed to be unclean. However, the Lord understood that in this mortal flesh, this is the condition of the battle. So they for lack of a better word, he made provision he made way for cases like this, where, okay, this happens, this is what you would do, and then this is how you would go about it. But guess what? In the kingdom, when we're perfect, some of these things we're not going to have to, worry about. We'll be able to perform these ordinances perfectly, when it comes to remaining unclean, keeping the Sabbath, like these kinds of things, that you may fall short on now because we're imperfect. We won't have that problem. Verse 27, and in the day that he goeth into the sanctuary, onto the inner court to minister in the sanctuary, he shall offer his sin offering, saith the Lord Yahweh. See? So after he was cleansed, he'd have to offer a sin offering, which makes it sound like, well, this is like, it sounds like this is something the Lord, included in there for this exception, but really, hey, verse 28, and it shall be unto them for an inheritance. I am their inheritance. So the ministry, the ordinance, you the duties of the Lord and all the things that came with it, that was their inheritance. And that's why the Lord says, I am their inheritance. And that's why the name Levi in Hebrew is Lo Yah, which means joined unto me. Okay. And ye shall give them no possession in Israel. I am their possession. So if you actually, if you look at how the land of Israel in terms of inheritance land-wise was divided, the Levites didn't have their own portion. What I mean is, there wasn't a place that's like, this is the land or Levi, this is the land of Judah. You had the land of Judah, you had the land of Benjamin, but there was no land of Levi. And instead, the Levites had suburbs, which are allocated portions within the various tribes' lands where it would be dedicated to the Levites. Verse 29, they shall eat the meat offering, or at least the priests, right? They shall eat the meat offering and the sin offering and the trespass offering, and every dedicated thing in Israel shall be theirs. So that also came with it. And the first of all the first fruits of all things, and every oblation of all, of every sort of your oblations, shall be the priests. Ye shall also give, and the oblation was the sacrifices. Remember that when you read in the law, when it comes to some sacrifices, it's not every sacrifice you throw. Like for some sacrifices, you would cut off maybe like the head, and then the cut open the body, and then you would actually sacrifice or burn the fat or the caul or the kidneys onto the Lord. But the other parts, wouldn't necessarily be burnt, depending on what sacrifice it is. So what do you do with that meat? Well, what do you think it means when it says that the Levites would eat the holy things? It wasn't just bread that they would eat all day. Part of that came with the meat. So it says here, continuing in verse 30, shall be the priest. Ye shall also give unto the priest the first of your dough, that he may cause the blessing to rest in thine house. Verse 31, the priests shall not eat of anything that died of itself, or torn, whether it be fowl or beast. So you have a situation where, once again, like this animal just dies of its own, you can't eat that. Or it was killed by another animal and you can't eat that. The priest can't eat that. Okay? So you gotta get, if it's a lamb, or a cow, you gotta get it while it's alive, nice and good, and then you slay it and prepare it. Okay, but that brings us to the end of Ezekiel, the 44th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.